Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the last 1%. In our healing, we often stop the process when the circumstances become tolerable rather than sort of completing the course of treatment, shall we say. And that last 1% can make all the difference. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everyone else who's joining us. Today we're talking about the last 1%. So I do healing, let's call it processing work on myself, as well as facilitating other people. And the way that I do the work for myself is I muscle test. And I go through a process as I'm muscle testing. And it's really, really interesting that I've noticed a pattern over time where I check percentages of completion. So, like, when there's an issue, the issue will also often show up at like 75%, and I want to take it to 100%. And what I notice is that it might go from 75% or whatever, that's an arbitrary number I'm just picking, but it might go from, say, 75% to 98 or 99% very quickly. And then it's the last 1% or the last 2% that can take sometimes days, sometimes weeks, which is so surprising to me. And I do believe that it's that last 1% that really completes, of course, right? Because we're talking about 100%, but it completes the process and kind of closes the book on that issue, or at least that aspect of that issue. And I think because that can take so much effort and time to get to that place of true completion, we tend to settle for good enough. Like, I feel good enough. I feel better enough. I don't feel perfect. And I don't feel 100%, but I feel good enough. And I think that's an interesting concept, because in many, many cases, good enough is good enough. Like the going to the 100% is often sort of an exercise in diminishing returns, right? Because we're putting out all this effort to get that 1% change. And so, in so many ways, good enough is good enough. And yet, with this work that I do, particularly for myself, because when I do it for myself, it has a different structure than it does for clients. But what I know through experience is that last 1% makes a big difference. And so I think that's an interesting question to engage in our lives. Like, when is good enough good enough? And when do we take on that last 1%? And I don't have an easy answer for that at all. I just think it's such an interesting question, because there's so many demands on our lives, right? We have so many things typically that we're doing and are responsible for. And with all these demands, then the question is the quest for perfection can be a trap, a big trap, because what is perfection, right? So we have this notion of what perfection is, and we have this idea that it looks a certain way. But I find it an interesting question, because I think probably it's only in the context of this work that I do, particularly with myself, that the 100% becomes the measure, that there's no quitting before that. And I use the word quitting, but there's no exit before the 100%. And I would hope that there's some areas where the 100% is important. Like, I would hope that in working with nuclear energy, for example, or brain surgery, or that there are some areas where the 100% is the baseline. Like, that's the standard, that's the gold standard, and that's what needs to be maintained. In many other cases, we need to know when to say enough. And so, for instance, as an artist, I worked as a graphic designer for a while, and it was really important to know when good enough was good enough. And there's this balance that we confront, I guess, in life, where we have standards, whatever our standards are. So this is a interesting conversation moving into the question of standards. You know, we talk about lowering our standards, raising our standards, holding our standards, and having high standards, having no standards, low standards. You know, what does that, how does that impact our lives? Because I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. And I say that with a smile, but it was painful, actually, to be a perfectionist. Nothing was ever good enough. And so that perfectionism was a recipe for dissatisfaction, right? To be judging and evaluating not just myself, but everyone and everything around me, not measuring up to whatever this standard of perfection was. And it's that kind of standard of perfection that can destroy relationships, that can eat up our gut. You know, if nothing is ever good enough, we might be pressuring ourselves all the time, feeling inadequate, feeling anxious, or we may be projecting that on other people, and through judgment, separating ourselves. And so, what is this notion of perfection? I think as a recovering perfectionist, one of the ways that I moved through that was by allowing the perfectly imperfect, to accept imperfection as its own perfection, so that I didn't have to be having the pressure of running around trying to fix everything all the time. And I think that that can extend even to the world, is even though there are things that we see that could be improved, there's perhaps a perfection in the process that is emerging. Doesn't mean we do nothing. We choose how we want to invest our time and our energies, and hopefully we find ways to do that that are enlivening and fill us with a sense of fulfillment and purpose. But the notion of perfection is, there's a rigidity to the standards that we might be adopting that then controls us. And I think that the striving for perfection, I think there's a difference between excellence and perfection, perhaps, first off. But I think striving for perfection is a way to deal with feeling out of control, to feeling that life is out of control, that we ourselves are out of control, and trying to exercise some kind of influence on the environment, trying to take back control. So if everything is perfect and everything is in its perfect place, and then that's a way that we can have the illusion of control. Excellence, I think, is maybe a different thing. I had an image, for instance, of the Olympians, who are striving for excellence, and that's very much a personal quest for excelling, for pushing our limits, for or expanding our limits, for living into and beyond the edges. I just have seen how perfectionism becomes an affliction. And there are some things that require 100%. Good morning, Dido. Welcome, welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. So we're talking about the last 1%, and I've been talking about that in the importance of the last 1% in this healing process that I do with myself, or dissolving process, or whatever we want to call it. Clearing process is probably a better word. That when I do this work with myself, good morning, loved by God. Thank you so much. Loved by God says so much love, Mira. So much love to you. And thank you for being with us. So in this process that I do for myself, I keep muscle testing until I reach 100%, and then I know it's complete. You know, there are things that we go to 100%, and there are other things that it's okay for good enough to be good enough. It doesn't have to be 100%. Doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the very, 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 very best all the time. I forget, there's a saying in marketing, it's better to get something done. This isn't just for marketing. Sometimes it's better to just get it done rather than get it perfect, right? So rather than writing a book for our whole lives, maybe it's better to just write the book until it's good enough, or do the painting until it's like, okay, I could work on this forever. I could continue to do this forever. But I'm saying it, okay, it's good enough. It's done. So there is the diminishing returns that occur in so many processes in life, right? Where we just, oh, I know what it is, 80%, putting our effort into the 80%. Oh, Rosalind says, what's the quality of 99%? Let me try and do this 80% thing if I can remember the quote that 80% of the results are gotten by, I can't remember the details here. The numbers was 20% of the effort gets 80% of the results, or something like that. And then we spend all this extra effort just trying to get a nominal result. And maybe we're at a good place to be at 80% in many, 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 many cases. So Rosalind says, what is the quality of 99%? The thing that comes to mind is, oh, so close. But the thing with this healing thing that is giving me pause, and that is the conundrum for me, with the clearing thing that I do for myself, is that I can get to 99% like that. Like, that's easy. But that last 1%, like I said, can take days and sometimes weeks. And it's remarkable. So it leads me to believe that that last 1% is really important. Maybe because it doesn't just clear. So I'm wondering, where else in our lives is that last 1% worth investing our time and energy in? And in these processes that I do for myself, I think that that's one clear place. I'm not sure where else 100% is critical. And yet there are places, I imagine there are multiple places where it is. And so again, where it brought up a conversation around good enough. What is good enough? How much is good enough? And like really good enough, not like feeling that it's not good enough and saying it's good enough, but really experiencing, yeah, that's good enough. And when is, and so we were talking about good enough, perfection and excellence, the distinction between perfection and excellence, and control as a facet of perfectionism, where we can use perfectionism to avoid doing anything. Like, I'm not even going to start. There was a point in my life, like I said, I'm a recovering perfectionist. There was a point in my life where I would not try something because I knew I couldn't do it perfectly. And in fact, I recently was talking to a client who never took a course in anything because they didn't feel that they would be able to do it perfectly. They were afraid that they would fail. And so in so much of life, good enough is good enough. Like truly, truly, good enough is good. So it's funny because I'm feeling both sides of this conversation. But in that last 1%, there are dimensions and dimensions and dimensions, it seems. Just out of the experience that I have in doing this work with myself, I just see that that last 1% is the kicker. That last 1% takes way longer than the rest of the process. Sometimes it's worth it. Most times probably it isn't. So when can good enough be good enough without really settling? How about that? I mean, that's to say, yeah, this is good. This is good enough. And especially like with creative stuff, with any kind of creative stuff. It's like how much effort, energy, investment, I guess we get to say, do you put into something? When do you know to stop? When do you know that it's done? So I guess those are a lot of questions today for us to be looking at ourselves and our lives. When is good enough good enough? And what does that look like? And what is perfectionism? Is it controlling us? Are we using it as a way to avoid what in really engaging in life? So that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it is a delight and a gift to be able to spend this time together, musing about what it is to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.